Welcome. The Indie Council is in session. It's a special spooky episode, as you can see here. But this is a place for the leading voices from across the industry to gather to talk news, titles, and everything indie. I'm your master of ceremonies, Jill Grote, the Indie Informer. Joining the council today, Polly says whatever she wants it to, Jenny Wyndham.
Hello.
Hello. All day fire fresh, Janet Garcia.
Hello.
And I fixed it, Mike Towndrow.
Hello. You can't fix me. Nobody can.
I promise you that particular line will hit much differently by the end of this episode. Jenny knows what I'm saying. She's down here shaking her head. I can see it. Today is going to be a very special episode because, first of all, happy spooky day to everybody when you are watching this.
Yay.
Possibly. It's out today. But also we are going to spend the lion's share of the episode talking about mouthwashing, and we're going to start off spoil free, but then we're going to go full spoilers. So we'll let you know when that happens. But before we get to that, let's talk indie news. I'm having so much fun with my flippers.
Yeah, can we real quick? Can we
cute.
know what everyone's dressed as and then if you want to see the video version, obviously go to that.
Oh, yep, yeah.
Mhm.
Because audio, this joke doesn't work if you're not watching us, unfortunately.
No, Jill just actually
so-
has flippers now. Horrible accident.
Everyone's like, what the heck?
Mouthwashing
yes.
really changed her.
Mouthwashing
foam.
will change you.
Yeah.
So I am dressed as a penguin, for anybody who's not watching. Janet, how about you?
I know. I was like that. I was like, yeah. I'm like, what is anyone gonna jump in? I'm Hulkenberg from Metaphor for Fantagio, and the reason I haven't made more progress in that game is because, well, one, it's not an indie, so I don't talk about it here, and two, I was busy making this costume. So
Yep.
So good. Oh my gosh. I am Sen from basically Princess Mononoke. I don't know if everyone knows her name, but Princess Mononoke.
I am Dr. Robotnik, Eggman, obviously, with my jewels. I have all my Chaos Emeralds and my Sonic that I spent a solid $80 at the North Carolina State Fair to win.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, I saw that series. I was rooting for you, just so you know.
Thanks, we eventually got there.
Yeah, I know. It was like this whole series of social posts where it was just like, I thought I was going to get it and I'm not, and I'm going to try again, wish me luck, and then nothing was going, and I was like, I was feeling that roller coaster with you.
Man, I don't know if she's listening, but hey, kudos to the woman working the balloon dart game. You swindled me. I said 3 darts. You upped me to 7. You took my card without giving me a price. I heard you whisper, it's $43 to your colleague. And then you swiped that card 2 times.
Yeah, if you're listening, we all appreciate you.
Especially you, dart lady.
Okay, indie news. Curve Games is now publishing Waxheads. This news came out last Friday, and on the surface, it's a kind of short, interesting blurb, but the history behind all of this is so kind of below the surface that I just wanted to talk about it a little bit because it is a very interesting, somewhat sad, somewhat what's going on in the industry right now example. So there is a demo out for Waxheads if you want to go play it, because first of all, I've played the demo in previous times, sometime in the last few months, and I really loved this game. I just loved being in the world and the atmosphere and all of the like punk positivity that was going on. So go check that out. There's no current release date. The developer, which I am going to say wrong, but it is Patati Games, go with that, is a 2-person indie developer that includes Murray Summerwolf, who was a developer on Welcome to Elk, Spit Kiss, Dead Pets Unleashed. Keep that game in mind for a second. And Rathio Tome, who is a former Unity developer, support engineer, and a Spanish game dev streamer, which is an interesting combination. Okay, so what you need to know is that Triple Topping Games, who was in the process of making Dead Pets Unleashed, declared bankruptcy last year. I think it was in early December. And that studio laid off all of the devs that were like, the studio went away, it completely collapsed. No more. Like, Dead Pets Unleashed is still supposedly coming out. Like, as far as I know, it is still up on Steam. It still has a demo, but the release date is TBA. And I don't know where that is in the limbo of things. But the developer who is creating Waxheads was caught up in all of those layoffs. So that was last December. Cut forward to this year, April, you actually get the announcement of Wax Heads. And I'm like, I don't know if time works the way it's supposed to anymore, because I was certain that Wax Heads had been around forever and this whole situation with Dead Pets Unleashed was like at least 3 years ago. But this is all happened very, very recently, and it's it is a good thing to see. Perhaps maybe this is the silver lining, that the developer has gone off, created their own developing space with just 2 people, and is now creating this game, which has a lot of DNA. If you've played like Welcome to Elk, and I did play a little bit of Dead Pets Unleashed, like it has a lot of that DNA in it. It is definitely a kind of different thing. But I'm really glad to see this. I'm glad to see that from April, where they were just self-publishing, now they are getting picked up by a publisher. So this game seems to have a lot more safety net. Like, of course, that's not where we are in the industry right now. That's not a 100% guarantee that everything's going to go peachy. But yeah, I think this is just in the midst of a lot of bad happening, even just today. Like, it is a good story to see, and a reminder that for all of the wise penguin words, a reminder that for all of the devastation that we're seeing in a lot of the jobs in this industry, like, people are still finding a way through, and hopefully there's a silver lining for indies and the industry at large. I don't know, maybe that's just my personal take and that's a little too optimistic, but yeah, I need it. I need that lifeline right now.
Yeah, I will say, first off, you questioned time, and you don't know if time works the way it's supposed to. I do have an emerald for that.
I appreciate
I'll
it.
send
I'll
it your
take
way.
that. Yep.
Dead Pets Unleashed rocks. I just want to shout them out, and triple topping. They are such kind, lovely human beings. We linked up with them at like, I know Jill. It seems like it's been like a decade, but it must have been
Right.
like Play NYC 2022 maybe. It was like legit like a couple months before the news about like the bankruptcy and them ceasing production on Dead Pets. But like you mentioned, the demo is still available on Steam. I cannot recommend go checking it out enough. It is a similar to Drag Her. It is a game that is inherently unique and necessary, and has perspective that you don't really see widely in games. So please go check it out. It's rad. I do also want to note that the publisher is Akapara on Dead Pets. That's new.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird. So maybe
Yeah,
Akapara is doing something with it. I don't know. Just tossing
maybe.
that out
Yeah,
there
as
also.
far as I know, it's still going. That's the last word I heard on
So
it.
yeah, originally it was self-published. Like the Akapara thing is new
Is
to
new.
my
Maybe that's why I
understanding.
have it in my brain that something is still going on with
Yeah.
that. Maybe I
So
heard that.
hopefully it does. And yeah, just reiterating, like, shout out to Curve for picking up Waxheads. Waxheads is very damn good, and
Yeah.
as a big vinyl person, that it speaks to me quite a bit. Very excited. Curve has been getting kind of a resurgence lately. I think starting with like Dungeons of Hinterberg, and obviously now
Yeah.
this. I feel like they're like maybe like in the past like 5 or so years, they were like on top of the indie scene. In my opinion, they were putting out banger after banger, and then they kind of quieted it down for a bit. So, but it seems like they're spinning back up again. So love
Right.
to see it.
Okay. I think that's going to be a very short indie news segment for us, because we have a very large topic of the show to jump into, and that is our mouth washing breakdown. And I use breakdown because it seemed like a good word to use for mouth washing.
Yes.
So before we get started, this is going to be non-spoilers. Keep that in mind. Everybody, if you could just in one sentence sum up what is mouthwashing. Mike, go ahead.
I felt like we were taking a test. I wrote a claustrophobic mind bleep about spiraling isolation, desperation, and the sense of giving up.
Mine was, as most shipwreck stories are, it's about monstrous greed and horrifying humanity. Jenny.
I swear I have explanations for mine. A horrifying and complex game about the dangers of toxic masculinity and its destructive powers, especially when combined with capitalism.
I like it. I
Nice.
like it. Janet, what do you got?
And mine is a little effed up narrative psychological horror game.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
I have a couple of descriptions, like official quote unquote descriptions, just to get kind of a base work here for people who've never heard of this game and have not heard us explain it before. So Wikipedia describes it as Mouthwashing is a 2024 first-person psychological horror adventure game developed by Wrong Organ and published by Critical Reflex. The game follows the 5 crew members of the freighter spaceship Tulpar after a mysterious crash leaves them stranded in space, trapped with the Tulpar as supplies dwindle. The captain, alive but severely maimed and unable to speak or move, is blamed by the remaining crew for deliberately crashing the ship for reasons unknown. The game uses a split, non-linear narrative. And that is true. But also, the developers describe it thusly. Who could have known what good old Captain Curly was capable of? Guess he thought his crew dying alongside him was only right. But some men can't even kill themselves properly. Maimed, limbless, and unable to speak, but alive. Curly is now at the mercy of the crew he has doomed to a slow death. Follow the lives of the crew as they weather starvation, isolation, and each other. People were never your strong suit anyway. Okay. It's a very complicated, deep, open to interpretation kind of game. It is in fact a horror game, but I don't know. It's horrific in a lot of the gory details. It's horrific in what is happening, but there is no big bad monster that's coming after you for the most part.
We'll get into spoilers later.
Yeah, we'll get into spoilers, but like I think this is less of a scary game to me, like a spooky horror game, more as a like it. There are certain movies that I've seen that I'm like, I've seen that and it was important for me to see it, and I never want to see that again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they're not necessarily horror films. I'm trying to remember what the name of it is, but I've so wiped it from my brain that I never want to see. Like, but everyone knows like there are those types of movies.
I have a kind of a good equivalent to that.
Uh-huh.
So I think a great example would be in terms of film would be something like The Witch, or if you are literal with the pronunciation, the Vich, the double V's. Technically, sure, it's a genre horror film, but it's not scary. Like it doesn't like there's no jump scares. There's no sure there is a big bad, but like there's no monster looming in the forest or whatever it may be. Um, and I think that's like such a fantastic thing about horror. There's really no rules. Horror never, like in my opinion, doesn't equate to scary. I kind of equate something like The Witch maybe in its own subgenre of just like dread, because you just feel the sense of dread throughout that entire 2+ hour runtime. And I feel like Mouthwashing is very similar in that, where you just feel this weight the entire playthrough. And as the details start to unravel, and in some sense your psyche starts to unravel, that weight is just building and building and building until credits eventually roll. Where does it ever really truly get lifted? I don't think so. It's one of these games that I still think about. I still think about the weight, and I think that's why I adore this game so much. But yeah, I would equate this more to like that sense of dread versus like something like, just going off the top of my head because it launched today, I believe, Phasmophobia, which has like jump scares and stuff like at every corner.
Right. Or like Visage is another one that's like
Yeah.
a very famous, like that is a scary game.
Yeah.
That is spooky and ghosts and all of that. The movie I was thinking of was Requiem for a Dream.
Oh, okay.
Like you seen it, but I never want to watch that movie again, but I know it's very good.
And with
Mike's going to be
Mouthwashing,
like, I go back and watch that every month.
I haven't seen Requiem in a long time. It's a good fucking movie. Yeah, I think this is like wholeheartedly a grunge horror indie, and I think like a good another kind of like category you could fit this into, or like kind of a descriptor is like this is a art house ass video game, and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's not I don't think it's gonna go up for any like Keeley Awards or anything like that, like not in that sense, but like this game is so like abstract and wonderfully constructed, but like you said, it's not like a Visage that is like a point A to point B horror flick, popcorn flick kind of thing. It's definitely an acquired taste. I don't think everybody would love it, but for the folks that it does click with, I think it really clicks.
Yeah. Janet, Jenny, anybody got thoughts on what this game is, what people need to know, how you're feeling about it?
It definitely is like a little bit more. I mean, it is all of those things, and it isn't what I think a lot of people associate with horror. But I do think that it's a little scary. Like I had like 2 or 3 moments where I physically jumped playing the game, and not because it's a jump scary game, but because frankly I'm easily startled. So a slight easy startle warning for people playing it. But I do think if this is a game for people, beyond just like the horror element of it, if you like good story games and you're down for like the more artsy construction of a story game, and by that I just mean like I think whenever you're invoking like a non-linear narrative structure, it's getting a little bit more into like that territory, and I'm using that in a very general sense. Obviously every game has artistic merit to it, but I feel like there will be some people who don't like unconventional narrative structure, or don't like people might read who don't like reading into like metaphors of things might not find this game as enjoyable, because I think if you look at this game too much on its face value, because it is in this freaky psychological horror realm, you might be like, so I don't get it. Is he seeing this? Is he not seeing? It's like, well, you kind of have to go for the ride of a lot of the visuals of this game is about conveying emotion and feeling, and the point is almost to not really be aware of what you might be seeing and what you might not be. It's really playing with those themes of the horrific nature of space and the existence of being in outer space and how scary that is. So you kind of have to be down for that kind of thing. And I think people listening, if you're that kind of player or if you're not. Like if you get excited about like not knowing what something is and going into like a weird narrative, like this is going to be a game that you're going to get a kick out of. But if that stuff doesn't really get you out of your seat, you might not be as into Mouthwashing as I think we seem to be largely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Jenny.
think I was really, kind of jumping here, but I was really pleasantly surprised by this game because it was much more character focused than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Like I knew it was going to have 5 characters and you're stranded on a ship, but just the character development and the ways that they encourage you to explore those characters, I think for me was a lot of the joy in playing, and it's just encapsulated in a very gory, like many ways body horror, like other horrors are just like that scenery in which you place those characters. And so I really enjoyed how like thoughtful it was in a lot of things.
Mhm.
And I am a person who loves like the metaphor. I'm a former English teacher, right? So I'm like looking for the metaphors. I'm looking for, like what could this mean outside of just like the specifics of what we're seeing. And my favorite kind of horror I'm learning this year is that psychological horror, the horrors of humanity more so than just like scary monsters, And so I think this for me, and if you're this kind of person, I think this will hit. I was hesitant at first because I was like, I see there are a lot of content warnings. Definitely take those, for yourself, your play style and what you can and cannot like enjoy. But I'm happy that I went into it and I still gave it a shot because I came away and I was like, okay, this was really valuable, I think, for me in playing this.
Yeah, I think you hit really good on something that I thought was particularly well done in this game versus other games perhaps in the horror genre I don't feel as much. Is like the empathy of this game is so piercing. Like all of this horrible stuff that's going on, and suddenly I'm like, I feel such deep empathy for a character that I did not before that I am suddenly like, oh wow, I really understand what's happening and what's going on with you, whereas I might have started in a very different perspective. And the fact that it hits so hard is a testament to the way this game is set up and the way that everything else is so, like, the dark is so dark that these glimmers of light that you get mean so much more, which I just absolutely love.
I think it's also incredibly impressive how much character development and story building and the journey they take you on in what 3 hours. It's incredible
Yeah,
what
3-4
they
hours.
achieved
Yeah.
in that short amount of time. Which like I feel like sometimes like your 50, 60, 70, 80 hour RPGs can't even really reach that kind of level that this game does narratively and on a character basis.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm biased. It's a sicko little freaky Mike game. Like I'm sure, but
I want to find an official, like, I don't know if there is an official content warning
Yeah,
I
on,
think the
on
Steam
this game.
page is more limited in what I would like. I think it's that classic issue that I think a lot of narrative games have where they like worry about the content
Spoilers.
warnings also spoiling the content of the game. But I would say that it's definitely a game that has trauma in it. So I think if you maybe, as far as like potentially avoiding certain games because you don't want to engage with certain content, I think if you have trauma-based triggers, it's worth maybe doing a little bit of extra looking into for like the more specific plot points, because I do think that there's some of that not surfaced. So that's like the closest to a non-spoilery trigger warning that I would add on there, like traumatic events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah, we
think
are talking about,
even if you dig into that a little bit and you want to find out what we're talking about, it doesn't necessarily spoil some of the major beats, so you're okay there.
yeah. But yeah, we talked about like body horror, gore. There aren't really that many. There aren't jump scares as far as I can really remember.
There's
The little
one
guy. Yeah.
yeah. The little guy.
The little guy.
Okay. Yeah, the little guy.
And also, like, again,
Well,
if you're just easily startled, like one time I
was gonna
turned
say,
around
there
and
were
someone was
two
just
other
standing close to
places.
me.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Okay,
whoa. Can you like make some noise when you step on this freighter ship? Like, hello? Like, did your boots not make any
I
sound?
think I know exactly the moment you're talking about, Janet. 'Cause
Yeah.
I had the same thing.
It's definitely giving, like, if you're someone who's like, I was in the office and then your partner was like, hey, I was just, and you're like, oh my God, where'd you go? Like, you'll have one of those, but it's
Yeah.
not really, again, how intended is that? It varies. I'm not sure. Different people get scared by different stuff, but it's definitely not like a jump scary game.
No.
Yeah. No.
I think too, the last, like, as we start to, slowly leave into or head towards our more spoiler territory, another thing I want to point to as far as like what makes this, different than what one might envision with horror. Because again, I think, Mike, that's a good distinction. Like, a lot of people think horror and they only think one thing when really, and then they'll kind of end up perpetuating that narrative by saying, oh, it's not like a regular horror game. Actually, it is. It's just a different type of horror. But I think another thing to point out for people wondering if this is for them is that mechanically it is much more like you're getting things or putting things together here and there. It is very low on what you might conceptualize with a horror game, which is like running from a thing all the time or shooting a thing all the time. Again, it might pull in some elements of that in parts of the story, but that is not the main thing. It is much closer to like a walking sim style mechanical structure than it is to like a Resident Evil or even like a Crow Country or, other things that I think are more stereotypically envisioned when you think of what a horror game is.
Yeah, there's like, if we want to go like walking sim versus like combat puzzle, whatever, there's two segments I can think of that lean into more gameplay heavy stuff. I'm trying to not do spoilers, but we'll get into it.
Right.
Before we do get into spoilers, also, I do want, because you wrote, Jill, visuals and soundscape, I do just want to highlight, obviously, grunge horror, very low poly, PS1 aesthetic, grain filters, and the whole 9 yards. When we chatted with the devs ahead of the 6.0 Indie Showcase, I asked them about them, just like the balance of messing with the players, because like this game screws with the player quite a bit, and I cannot get enough of it. I think they put enough in there to make you want more of it, and like it's so, again, for a 3-4 hour game, it's so well spread out and paced out where like when you think something's gonna happen, it doesn't. But when you are like feeling safe, all of a sudden the scene changes and spoilery things happen. Um, and it's just like it's such a fun, just in a sense, fourth wall breaking kind of thing, but also related to the character that you're playing as. And yeah, I just want to commend them on that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will
And
say they use sound really effectively in this game. I think what I
Yeah.
appreciated is that there were some moments from like they could have said, okay, we're going to animate this, we're going to show you what the action
Yeah.
is. And what they do instead in some of these moments is just let the sound happen and you have to imagine everything. And I think again they played with that so wonderfully. So I thought that was really good because I mean, I feel like our imaginations are always going to imagine what
The
is
worst.
much worse than what any game or any media can convey, you know? And so I think it's like, yeah, I thought that was really, really well done.
I'm just a huge fan of anything technical, like the visuals, especially for me in this game, that underpin the themes and kind of what's going on. So, like, having this be hard to make out the details of the actual visuals is just another great kind of cherry on top, but
Yeah.
also a foundational thing at the same time.
And in addition to like the grunge, low poly, grainy nature, I want to also commend them on the actual art direction, like some of the
Yeah.
scenery, the character design, the creepy mascot that's in the game. Obviously, you know, the boss, the captain of the ship is gnarly. Yeah, there's just a lot of really cool stuff and some like FMV elements to some extent also that are
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
well placed in there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
the
I think my
whole
last like visual comment on that as well is like something I was just talking about this game on MinMax actually, and Jacob Geller had mentioned the jump cutting in this game, and it really does have this like cinematic feel to it that serves kind of everything. Like it feels like everything in this game is in strong communication with like the other parts to like convey the message. So those cuts allow for, you know, a layer of surrealism to come through when they're kind of like slowly transitioning and like the screen is undulating and things are tearing, but it also is like a nice way to transition the player into like another scene immediately. And I think because they are playing with time as well, it's a lot of kind of re-getting your bearings, kind of and parsing out like what is reality, what isn't, and okay, well if this isn't real, like why am I seeing this? Like, you know, what might this mean for like the larger themes or for what this character is feeling or what does this represent? And then, you know, there's also like a lot of callbacks. And I think that's where, you know, to echo what you mentioned, Jenny, with like the ex English teacher stuff. It's like, it's a very like literary game too, where it's, you know, then that's the thing. If you're a nerd for that stuff, not that you need to hyper analyze it to get the general messages, because I do think that part is very clear, but like a lot of good texts, the more you dig into it, the more there is for you to examine if you choose to. And I think that's very true of the cinematography of this game as well.
Okay. With that, I think,
Real quick,
unless anybody
before we go into
before we make a jump,
spoilers,
okay.
in case
Our
you
own
are
jump cut.
in case you are about to tune out and you're going to play, then maybe come back. Worth shouting out. Everybody should also go play their other game, How Fish is Made. It's very good.
Yeah.
I
This
need
was
to play
originally
that, yeah.
like an update for that game, right?
Yeah, this year I think maybe or last year, but yeah.
And then yeah, it grew into its own thing. And
Yeah.
it's wild to watch the first like announcement trailer versus
Yeah.
the release trailer because it changes so
It's
much.
crazy.
But okay, let's crash head first into spoilers, everybody.
I see what you did there.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Nice, yeah.
It was good. I was proud of myself when I thought of it. This game begins by making you the bad guy, but you don't know anything about it.
I'm sorry, you
So-
wrote baddie. I'm not gonna let,
I did
I'm
write
not gonna let
baddie.
that slide.
I wrote baddie. I'm sorry. I apologize. And this is sort of where I first played this game when it like just before it released, and I played this section and then I stopped because I'm like, I know the intensity of the thing that I'm going to get into, and I don't know if I have the ability to do that emotionally right now. And then y'all made me play it for this. So it is such a beautiful, strong, horrific, entrance to this world, introduction to what is going on, because it gives you information you think gives you knowledge, and it is not. It's perfect.
Similar to what Jenny was saying earlier with I forgot what point we were making, but I love that this is not a cutscene and it makes you do the actions of purposefully crashing the ship or hitting the asteroid. It's been a bit hitting the asteroid, I believe.
Yeah.
Which makes you as the player feel guilty in a sense, and like I don't know if anybody
Mhm.
has tried to not do the things, but
Mhm.
like it purposely does. Like I think they built in like a system where like if you do try to not do the thing, it will like give you a little wink and nod of like, no, you got to do it. Which I also really appreciate. Again, breaking that fourth wall a little bit. But yeah, I love that it really pushes you, which sets the bar of what you're about to experience, as Jill was saying.
Mhm.
Again, quite heavy.
Yeah.
I think too, it's like a fun bucking of like video game trends. Like I think a lot of, unfortunately for a lot of gamers, they are not necessarily into like being a bad person in a video game by the developer's force. Like people are fine, like, oh,
Mhm.
I play evil and they have fun with that. But when it's like when the game makes you do something bad and then kind of tells you you're bad for doing it, like that was a big conversation, obviously on the AAA side
Mhm.
with like Last of Us 2. And I'm like, I feel like it's such a surface I'm like, guys, engage with the text a little bit more. And I feel like this immediately forces you to do that. It also kind of, I think, immediately gestures towards the unconventional narrative structure it's going to take, because in so many other games, like it kind of starts you at what feels like the end of another
Mhm.
game or something. So I think right away you're primed to be sort of confused, like, oh, I guess I'm the guy crashing the ship. Oh, I guess I have to crash it. Oh, well, oh, this is awkward. Like it just kind of puts you in an uncomfortable situation immediately, which I think is great priming of the player for like, hey, this is like we're playing around with story here. If you need to be the good person, like check that at the door. We're kind of immediately we're tearing the band-aid off now so that we
Mhm.
can keep tearing the band-aids off, which is ironic because Curly's covered in band-aids, like the big visual of the
Oh
game. But
no.
I think it's a kind of a fun start to setting you up for like, this is what you can expect from this video game.
Mhm.
I will say also we're using the term bad quite a bit. I think that we'll definitely circle back to that, but like I think there's just to put a pin in like, is it, is this person necessarily bad, or is there, do they need help,
Right.
or are
Are you
they
going to gain
sick,
Yes.
empathy
or
for what is happening in this scene
yeah.
sometime later? It's possible. This is a kind of thing that I am absolutely obsessed with in video games, because it's really only in video games you can make this happen. I don't remember who said it.
Mhm.
This is a quote from somebody somewhere.
Miyamoto?
Yeah, Miyamoto probably said it at some point. But like video games are different from most other entertainment medium because they can make you feel pride and guilt. You cannot feel proud of anything that happens in a game or in a TV show or a movie or reading a book. Like you didn't cause any of the characters to do anything. Like same thing with guilt. Like
Mhm.
the fact that it is a medium that allows you as a player to feel something of your actions is really a video game only thing. Um Big examples of this for me include like the one of the first Gods of War in the original like trilogy, where they make you push a guy in a cage up a big ramp, and then you have to like burn him alive.
Mm.
And it's like you, the player, decided to do that. You could have turned the game off, but you didn't. The other one is It Takes Two with the elephant. We're not going to talk
Mm.
about. But yeah, it's so great to see these moments where this is what a video game can do, and they do it all in the first like 15 minutes. This is a very, very good intro. Cut to the crew trying to figure out what to do with their lives. Like at this point, they've just hit an asteroid, but like everyone is mostly fine except for the captain, who is now in bandages.
Which
Um,
Curly is the perfect name for what this character
Yes.
design is.
right.
Yeah.
Curly is brilliant. Um, so at this moment, the crew is uneasy about what's happening, but they're not desperate yet. Like they're still sort of in that like, okay, this is a bad situation, but we can get through this. Um, and it's kind of hard to tell when that starts to change. It's such a gradual shift of things, and nothing can really be a gradual shift in this game because they do those cut like time changes so quickly. So it's a really interesting like one thing in the game that is a gradual subtle like thing is like, when are we going from like, oh, I guess we should figure out what to do, to like, oh, we've lost all sense of humanity. Like it'd be an interesting thing if you could go back and pinpoint. Okay, cut to the first painkiller scene, and I think I have these in order. I've tried to put the like events that of the game.
Yeah, thank you for making this timeline also.
Yes.
Because
Yeah,
This
incredible.
game jumps around a
Yeah.
lot.
So I think in general they should all be sort of where everything is. But this is what we were talking about before with the soundscape, I think, Jenny. So how are you feeling about this particular scene?
So this particular scene is pretty gnarly. So at this point, we are playing as Jimmy. I think that's important because that does
Yes.
change throughout the game. We're playing as crew member Jimmy, who has now taken upon himself to be the captain, because Curly, the captain, is like just suffering on the bed in wraps, and like I think Curly doesn't have like limbs anymore, totally burnt. Like it seems like whenever the crash happened, he was at that forefront. So you meet Anya, who is the ship's doctor. You also meet in this like moment, is it Daisuke? I think
Daisuke.
Daisuke?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I guess I could look at our document with the names. And then you also, who is like an intern who's learning mechanics and stuff, and Swansea, who is like the mentor for Daisuke. And so you're meeting all of these characters. You go to Anya as Jimmy, and Anya is like pretty beat up over having to give Curly painkillers because he does not have the capability to do anything himself.
He also doesn't have
Um,
lips.
he doesn't have lips. You have to physically in the game open his mouth to put in the painkillers. And that's just like very honestly kind of distressing to think about and look at, to be in a
Yeah.
position in which you're like having to take care of someone like that, and also to imagine being in that kind of position. And what they do, instead of showing this character Curly swallowing the pill, the scene cuts to black, and you just hear the struggles and the pain of this person swallowing their painkillers. And it was like, I had to set I was playing on Steam Deck, which it runs great on Steam Deck, but I had to like
Yes.
set it down, and I was like, okay, like this is the game that we're going into. So it was one of those, like everything up until that point was very eerie. We had sort of a disorienting hallway moment, but that was the point where I was like, okay, we're going to go real, real dark here just from that moment on.
Yeah. And it's one of the things that struck out to me kind of visually for this is that the game is played in essentially like 5 rooms, and they're all interconnected in one way or the other. But the only room that is directly connected to the lounge, which is kind of the central space where a lot of things happen and where you start out a lot of the scenes, the only room directly connected is the med bay. So if you've got the lounge door open and the med bay open, you can see Curly just sitting there. And it's just so like distressing, I guess, it's just a constant looming reminder of like the pain and suffering of not just that one person, but what everybody is going through, and what has happened to them. And not only that, but the crash seems to have hit in during like like sunset, during dusk time. So all of the ships like attempts at pretending to like have a day night cycle are
Yeah.
stuck on sunset, which is not a like subtle metaphor, but it is a very visually stunning one. So you're looking through this hallway to this person who has no limbs, who can't speak because presumably they have no tongue anymore, like who you can only see one bulging eye because they don't have eyelids. And underneath this kind of blood red sunset, it really set the visual tone for me.
Yeah.
Like-
Yeah, I think-
Oh, go ahead. I already talked a bunch, so I'll let.
Well, you did. I want to hear from you first, just because you had the like one thing kind of thing, and then me and Mike can add on.
Yeah,
We-
well,
yeah, we
I
can
was
fight.
gonna bring it a little bit towards the ship itself because we hadn't talked about the place where all of these characters are as well and the condition it's in. I think the sunset metaphor and like just like the visual of having it be just this kind of like orangey blood red is really important. The ship has crashed, and so there's this foam that is obstructing a lot of the doorways and the hallways and objects. And so what's really interesting is like it looks just gross and kind of disturbing because at first I wasn't sure what it was and I was like, is this like a fungus or what's going on? But it's something much more, I guess, normal. I think the space also, I talked about capitalism earlier, but it really is interesting to me that they're in a spaceship. We don't know at what time. Like this is kind of a timeless game in terms of we don't have an exact year, but there are no windows on this spaceship. And I'm like, they could have cut like a window, like whatever this company is. The purpose that they're on the ship is to like move cargo. It's like called the Pony Express, which is why they have a like cartoon pony there called Polly.
The
and
only
they
voiced
even-
character in this game.
Yep.
The only voice character
Yeah.
in this game. And they even have this like plastic, like sort of life-size-esque model of this character in their lounge that if you walk by just close enough, it will spout these horrible just like company sayings and reminders to you. And so I think in addition to the horrors of like, oh my God, the ship has just crashed, we need to figure out how to like last until help comes. You have this just like company presence that's also there that's just absolutely horrible. Like at the beginning, I don't know if you all, I forget how I got this, but I think it comes in the cutscene where it's like, oh, someone in the navigation team messed up their coordinates, 4,000 credits docked from your pay. And it's like, this is a ship crashing and there's a memo that's like, you did your
Yeah.
job wrong. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
So I think the presence of this company adds this extra element of horror to the whole scene as well. Like they're trying to survive, but then there's these reminders that are like, teamwork makes the dream work, and if you don't work as a team, you'll be collectively punished. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
this is influencing all of the characters' mindsets as well.
Yeah, the thing I was gonna add to the curly visual and everything, obviously it's a very central part to the game. Like the cover art of this game is like a singular eyeball and like some red around it. There's also some variants that have like a bunch of eyeballs behind it in the backdrop, but that's like essentially what this game is. You look it up, you see Curly and his one eye. I think they do such a great job at also digging into a trauma that I feel like doesn't get like as explored as often, especially like in games, which is like the like intensity and the fear, but then the combo of guilt of like caring for someone who is like essentially on their deathbed and
Mhm.
like what does that mean,
Yeah.
and then like what's the right thing to do, but also like the fear of what that is, but then also the guilt of like, well, it's bad if I feel afraid of a person who's in pain. I think back to like for because we all obviously like will bring things to the table and kind of impose our own like lives onto the media that we like kind of consume. But I remember like the first time like I like sort of witnessed stuff like that where it's like, oh, my grandma in the hospital having like a tube in her neck and like how like kind of gross it is with like the sounds, but then it's like, oh, and then do you want to leave? And then there's like all this kind of like, I think they convey that trauma really well with, again, like that audio, but also like the intentionality of having the one eye where it's like, he's in there, but like he can't talk to you. So then it's like, well, how does that change like how you operate or what you're doing? And then like the guilt of also like feeding him the pills. Like he isn't, he can't say what he wants. You don't know what he wants. Like you don't know anything. He's just
Mhm.
lying there, and you're kind of
Right.
like forced to be in this caretaker role, which is also like where we see the whole reason that you as Jimmy do that is because Anya is like, I don't really want to do it. And then that's kind of also a thread that we continue to see of Anya being like, like the mid medic, and like part of that's like maybe she's not that qualified, and the other part is like
Yeah,
Anya, do
I
your
think there
job.
was a
And it's like there's all
line.
this intensity with that.
I think there was a line where like this is like her first gig, like she didn't really have any formal training, so that's where that
Yeah.
skepticism came from.
Yeah, I think there's a great tie-in for that line about Anya for just how horrific, and I keep using that word because it just keeps sounding right, but Pony Express is, because it's trying so hard to cut corners, because the
Yeah.
bottom line is all that matters, that they've hired this medic who has really no medicinal training whatsoever. Anya has not gone to medical school. She did not
Yeah.
or at least she didn't complete it.
Yeah.
So she's really not prepared for anything to go wrong. And they've just kind of hired her as like probably legal says that we have to have some medical
Yeah.
person on board and we need to have these psych evals. So just
Yeah, she's also the shrink, which
Yeah,
is
she's
normally
also
like
the
that's
shrink.
not one job normally, So
Right.
I think that also
Yeah.
speaks to them cutting the corners and kind of just you can kind of do anything that has to do with people's bodies and minds, right?
Yeah, and
Like,
there's
I don't
also
know.
the moment of like I forgot where exactly it is, but like where Jimmy doesn't want to do his psyche vow, so the
Mhm.
Curly's just like, I'll do it, no worries. It's
I'll
like,
do it.
no, you're
Yeah.
the captain, you cannot do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Also,
classic
Will-
small team. being
classic small
exploited.
team, classy indie team,
Yeah.
I will say there's stuff, and I'm not going to jump ahead because I think there's stuff we learn about Anya later
Yes.
that made me far more
Yes.
understanding of like how she's
Yes.
acting right now. And I think one thing just to point out just to listeners is like understanding that we're seeing all of these characters through Jimmy's eyes right now and how they act
Mhm.
towards
Correct.
Jimmy. And so I think
Yeah.
at first I was like, what is Anya's deal? Like, she's a doctor. Like, why isn't she doing some of this stuff? And you learn throughout the game, and we'll get to why, but like, yeah, I think I am much more understanding of Anya now looking back as to how she acted in this moment than I was when I first played and I had none of the context.
Mhm.
Yeah, and kind of circling back to where this initially started. Well, two things. Janet, it's funny is not the word to use, but like I also had the moment of like seeing Curly and that caretaking moment, and like I instantly thought of my dad. So like it's
Mhm.
interesting that like we both had that moment. And says something about I guess our psyche of like how that equates to that, but whatever. Well, that's table that for another day. But what we talked about earlier, how like this game doesn't feature like a looming monster constantly chasing you down. The game very much frames Curly as the monster that is just like constantly persistent.
Yeah.
But like there is something also to be said of like, no, he's just a human being who was just put in a bad way, had a bad day. We don't know what his motivations
You
were.
had a bad day.
Yeah. And
but
like
yeah.
the developers say, he is now at the mercy of people who presume that he has left them to die a slow and painful
Yeah.
and scary and isolating death. So
Whether that's what he wants or doesn't, that's
Yeah.
because he can't communicate.
Yeah. I think that's what's so hard for me when listening to the audio of him being forced to take the painkillers is like is the knowledge that you don't know.
Yeah.
Like you just is he protesting because it hurts to just swallow? Because I imagine it probably does. But he wants to try and survive, or is he protesting because he just like does not want he wants to like end it and he just doesn't want any of this like caretaking to happen to him. And I think that's what also made me like it felt very uncomfortable as a player in that moment because I was like, I don't know what are we doing here? Why? Like, I felt very uncomfortable, and I thought that was really great that the game did that. But yeah,
Yeah. So
It's
in
like the first
this
5 minutes of the game, by the way.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
In this section, the crew kind of talks and decides, okay, we need to break into the cargo hold, which we can't do because that would be a captain thing. So we have to figure out how to do that. And that's kind of where we're getting some gameplay in getting like the code reader and everything. But the first section of this game is really about, okay, the hope that is the cargo hold and what is in there and how we like maybe it's spare parts for things that we can help rebuild the ship and get out of here. Maybe it's like year supplies of food or something. So when you finally break into the cargo hold is the first sort of time jump. Um, how would y'all describe these time jumps, and what was your first reaction to them? Because I had a very marked reaction.
I
I was like,
thought the
they changed
game
it from the
broke.
demo. I was like, so
See,
So going from the demo, when the demo did it, I had a giant smile on my face. Again, I love when I'm such a sucker for this kind of stuff, especially when it's done correctly. And I think this game does it correctly throughout its runtime.
yeah, there
see,
are
the
a
demo
couple
I played
times.
didn't have that in there. It just was one straight thing. So I
Oh,
was like,
interesting.
oh, we're gonna take longer to get to this reveal, which I think kind of made me feel like, okay, maybe this isn't as grand of a reveal. Like, not as grand of a reveal, but I'm like, okay, there's clearly gonna be a lot more to say in this game than it's dumb that we're shipping all this useless cargo. But go ahead, Jenny.
I think for me, so I thought for folks who haven't played yet, there are periods of time in the game where as you are moving or finishing up a scene or you're getting ready to do your next thing, the game essentially freezes.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can move your camera around and the pictures will blur. Sometimes it
It's so
just
good.
freezes, and then it eventually disintegrates into the next scene. There are a variety of ways that they do this, and the first like 2 times I was just like, oh my god, like what's wrong with my Steam Deck? So
Yeah,
I
the
thought
game's
like
broken.
it was really I thought it was really, really cool, and just from like an engagement standpoint, but also just showing this sort of the like what is it, sort of like this shudder of a transition. I thought that was just really powerful.
It kind of
um
reflects that the characters are like breaking down from moment to
yeah.
moment. Like
Yeah.
it's not a clean cut from scene to scene. It's like, yeah, you're
Mm-mm.
gonna just be drugged through the goddamn dirt just to progress through this like horrid narrative.
Mhm.
And like as a game player or especially as like a game reviewer, what is the scariest, most anxiety inducing thing that can happen to you while you're playing a game? It's crashing.
Yeah.
Oh no, did I just lose all of that? Like, do I have to replay it? All of this is going in your brain before it pops up and it's like, oh, this is the transition.
Mhm.
So I can't think of a more effective way to put the player in the mindset of the characters and what's happening to them, because you can't like put someone in a plane crash and now play this game. So like this seems genius to me, but the first time it happened 100% I was like, oh no, my game has crashed.
Mhm. Because yeah, it's just long enough. It's just long
Yeah.
enough for
Just
you to
long
be like,
enough.
oh wait, what?
And sometimes it's supported by sound design of like a
Yeah.
shuddering kind of like computer, like a graphics card freezing.
Yeah.
Essentially what happened to me and you, Jill, on that stream like last week.
Scary.
Yeah.
This is where we first get a sort of first person look at our first character, who's going to be the captain, and sort of their internal sufferings and goings ons. So we learn in this kind of short snippet that the captain is dealing with a great deal of stress, that is really starting to overwhelm him to a psychological degree. Um, when I got to the endless stairs, there's a section where you have to like go talk to. I think this is when you're doing the eval. You go down. You're supposed to go to the cockpit, and the stairs going down just continue on and on and on and on and on, and long enough for you to realize like, oh, okay, this is what's happening. This isn't just I thought these stairs were shorter. This is really going on and on and on. And then there's a moment where you're walking on wires and then everything stops and it's all black. I didn't hesitate. I was just like into the breach and I jumped straight off into it. I don't know if y'all stood there and wanted to like wait and see or if y'all jumped in there with me.
Nope.
Oh, I
I just
sent
went
it.
for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. That probably says something, but
It
Yeah.
says something about all of us, I think.
like, it's fine. It's not.
We're all
It's not
brave.
real. It's like you just go. Yeah, what's gonna happen? Just reload it.
We're
It's
not
fine.
cowards.
Jump back immediately. Like a lot of cool stuff happens here to kind of connect him to like capitalism and personal feelings of self-worth, personal feelings of responsibility that is being placed on him because of this company that is cutting corners and expecting him to do more than he ever needs to. Oh my gosh, a baby.
Baby.
So cute.
There's a
Oh,
kitten.
There's a
sighting
cat
for
on screen,
a
folks
cat
yeah.
has
who are
come into the
listening.
screen. Sorry, everybody. We needed to lighten the load a little bit. Cut to like, and again, anytime we cut to a new time, just remember that the game seems like it's breaking
Mhm.
when you cut to the cargo reveal. So you are looking down at an open box, um, and it is a box full of mouthwash.
Can I say I love how
Um,
they did this, by the way, where it's like, I feel like any other game would have been like, oh, the character's opening the box. What is it? There's like a discussion and murmur around it. Cut, everything's open already. There's mouthwash all over the place. Like, it's so like
yeah.
anticlimactic in a way, or it doesn't like lead you on. Just like, no, the result of this is bullshit. So like, we're gonna present it like it is bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And just before the cut was a commercial for this exact brand of mouthwash. And it was kind of like
Yeah.
a 50s, like, da da da, do your mouthwash with mouthwash company or
It's
whatever.
word for word. That's how it went.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. With
Nope
the
for nope.
penguin.
Yep.
So to see it and be like, there is no salvation here. This was our hope that the cargo hold would hold something of use. Um, our lives are being thrown away so that middle America can keep its mouth not even clean, because they talk about the fact, like, this is a very important comment for later, but
Mhm.
Anya, the ship's medic, comes forward and is like, we can't even use this mouthwash as a sort of disinfectant because there's so much sugar content. And you don't really perhaps think about what that means, but it is a dental hygiene product with so much sugar that it doesn't help, like, so we are shipping a product that is duping Americans into thinking they're being healthy when really it is rotting their teeth because it is sugary. That
Mhm.
is what we are losing our life for. This is all the pressure we've been under, all of the, like, terrible things that are happening to us is because someone needed to pay $1.50 for this like mass produced mouthwashing product. And it's just a perfect, I can't think of a better product that this could have been.
It's also a cool video
Just
game
a
name.
bucket of knives. Like, just,
Bucket of knives.
I
At
don't
least
know.
knives could have been, maybe you could have
Yeah,
melted
they-
down the knives or something.
really just ended everything. Yeah, it is a cool game name.
Yeah,
And it's
bucket of
yeah.
knives ain't as catchy.
Bucket
No.
of knives is
Bucket
we
of
could make
knives.
bucket of knives,
Yeah, I think it's also just like nice and how like mundane it is and how
Yeah.
like also
Mhm.
just it's like a good useless mundane thing that also I think again if we want to look at that and think about like okay well why did they choose this besides the what comes later of them like drinking it and getting drunk off of it besides that functionality which is very useful for the story as well. I think it's also the thing that's supposed to like cleanse you like can actually
Yeah.
kill like it kind of has this double-edged sword layer because of its sugar content that kind of also speaks towards the larger kind of MacGuffins within the story as well.
Mhm. Yeah, it's like the thing that's supposed to clean your teeth is gonna actually rot it. If you wash your
Yeah.
mouth with sugar, your teeth are gonna go bad. At least so the dentists have told us. So yeah, I think that
Liars.
irony there is really really good.
Yeah.
We also I wanted to highlight too. We learned in one of the conversations that you talked about earlier, Jill, that like Curly and Jimmy were friends back on Earth, which I thought was
Yes.
fascinating. That's just a really I think important detail in terms again this game to me is like how are these characters relating to each other, like what
Mhm.
what are their stories and how do they connect. And so Jimmy I think is only on the ship because Curly it seemed like Curly was pulling favors or something and kind of
Something
got
like that.
Jimmy the job or like put in a good word, and so that's why Jimmy's there. And so throughout the game you see Jimmy having this complex almost with Curly because he's like well you're like way up high on the ladder and I'm just trying to get to where you are, and there's constantly this like comparison between the two. And so even though they're like friendly with one another, at least from Jimmy's side it's almost like this frenemy situation it feels
Yeah.
like where
Mhm.
it's like there's this constant competition and push against this person who seems to like generally want to help him out. And I thought that was, again, very, very interesting dynamic between the two. And Daisuke was not supposed to be there. They were like commenting on how they
Yeah.
were not supposed to have a fifth
Right.
member.
It was very last minute. Yeah.
So like just thinking about the resources that they have like an extra person on top of all the stress that they were going through.
The poor boy. Poor lad.
Yeah.
Oh, I love him.
All of this
It's
comes
fine.
to
His
a
parents
head.
are rich.
Mhm.
Right.
I know.
I'll talk about
We find out
don't
like
worry
in
about
10
it.
seconds. In 10
such
seconds,
like a
this gets revealed.
heart-wrenching moment where he talks about like, I hope I'll talk about it in a bit.
Yeah.
It's coming
A
up,
lot
yeah.
of this comes to
Mhm.
a head in our next narrative jump, which I've called the news, and it gives us a time frame. So anytime we're jumping, I think from here on out, we get a time frame of where we are in time. So
Mhm.
we get a jump, and it says 6 days before the crash. So we are now before all of this. The captain gets a sheet of paper, like,
Like a fax.
again, it's a fax. Yeah, it's like they couldn't bother to call him to let him know this information. It's just this impersonal, like, quick memo, which you don't get to read as a player. So I find it really very interesting because it's kind of up for interpretation. But the general gist that you get from this news is that essentially the company is defunct. Pony Express no longer exists. So they're in the middle of like a year-long freight jump for a company that is now bankrupt and dissolved, and everybody has no job. They're not getting paid for this anymore. They don't have jobs after this. And because Curly is kind of a decent human being and having some like thoughts about this, he disregards his orders to not tell anyone. He is not supposed to tell anyone until he gets closer to dropping off. But instead, he goes to where everybody is at the lounge, and as he's about to tell everybody, surprise, it's our one like yearly allowed surprise party for the whole crew. Which he can't, like, it's his surprise party. It's obviously not his birthday, but like this is the one they
The
get,
one
and they
company
wanted
allowed birthday. It's like
Uh-huh.
I think what this game does well too, in relation to its take on capitalism, is I don't have a problem with a extremely on the nose anti-capitalistic story. Like that doesn't bother me, but it does. You can tell when it's very like, and this is the line where we hate capitalism, and I'm like, yeah, cool. I think this game does a good job at making it feel dystopian and futuristic while also feeling very realistic, because you can see
Mhm.
other examples of like this kind of stuff in real life. Like it's not as extreme, but like think about, again, other media. The Office had a joke like this as well, where they're like, what if we combine the birthdays to like, it's too many
Mhm.
birthdays. They're like, no, everyone's getting mad. And they kind of unravel that when Jim is the leader. I wonder how much of this, of that episode of The Office, the developers are thinking
Sorry,
of. 'Cause
Jimmy?
it actually has a lot of, Jimmy.
Oh my goodness.
Whoa, what a
Um,
connection.
Jimmy
and Parks and
Halpert.
Rec- Ron Swansea, hello. They're
What?
definitely these are sitcom watchers, is what I'm getting from the developers.
Curly
But-
Daisuke.
Yeah,
Wait,
like,
those
it's
are
all
both.
gonna-
Never mind.
This is
I screwed it up.
it's all coming and going. But this feels like just the right amount of things that like would happen.
Mhm.
Like, oh yeah, they would do that. And then it also, I think, communicates important information as well, which is that this crew runs together somewhat regularly because they all go around like swapping whose birthday year it is, essentially,
Mhm.
which is horrible, but
And
seems
they
accurate.
And they get to celebrate this birthday with like horrific, again, sorry for using the word, but like dehydrated uh like ingredients to make this like might be a cake thing. This like
Okay, new
fake
iconic game cake just dropped. By the way, Portal,
Honestly.
we have mouthwashing cake.
right.
true.
And the captain, whose supposed birthday it's supposed to be, has to make it because they won't the company doesn't trust everyone on the ship with the ingredients for the cake.
Mhm.
Like you
Mhm.
have, like, that's the level of how you are treated on this ship. It's like, we don't even trust you with the cake mix. Like, you would use it inappropriately or something. So all of this wrapped up in I'm coming here to tell you that our jobs are all gone. Um, it comes to a head when he sits down with the dehydrated fake cake and everyone's looking at him and they're like, make a speech. And I'm like, oh no, this is the worst moment. But obviously it's on his mind and he wants to tell them this. And the resulting argument tells you a lot about the characters. And we've talked about a lot of the characters. Um, but this really tells you where they are financially and socioeconomically. So Curly being the captain, he's pretty financially set. He's pretty set in like job and career. So he could bounce and he would be perfectly okay. In fact, all of his like stress problems, which he has shared with Jimmy, um, are pretty much gone after this. Like this is a good news situation for him for the most part. Like he's going to miss out on a little bit of wages, but this is an absolute death sentence to Swansea, who we have talked about. He is an older ex-alcoholic who like got mechanical skills, but like no one like it seems like he's probably got a bad reputation. It seems like probably not a lot of people are going to vouch for him. So when he hears this news, it's basically like, I am like, I'll never get another job. Like, I can't just restart a career. Talking about how, like, if you've ever seen someone lose their job in this market who is a middle aged person, like, ageism is a big thing. So basically his life is financially ruined and is going to have to figure out what to do with his life. Um Daisuke?
I think Daisuke.
Daisuke? What however they say his name.
Daisake? Dice? Yeah.
I was told daisuke by
Daisuke?
people in my
Daisuke.
chat, like
Okay.
dice, like rolling dice.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
Daisuke. Cool.
He seems to have been kind of like, you know, he's got rich family and they're watching out for him, but he seems to have screwed everything else up in his life. Whereas like to the point where even though he's got all these family connections, this is the only thing they get him, this like beat up internship for a spaceship. And then we talked a little bit about Anya, who seems to like has not graduated from medical school, seems to have a very bad um temperament for that kind of work. So what does she do after this? Like Jimmy is also very clear that he is on the bottom rung. He obviously has a chip on his shoulder about where he is in society and how he has not gotten any farther and where he's like sure that he and again we sort of understand that he got this job just because he was friends with the captain. So like everybody else for this news for them is the end of their life financially, even before like and this is days before the crash. So
though I think it's worth noting that while everyone else has like worse situations than Curly, because Curly before this was talking about, you know, I don't know if I want to be at this company anymore. I kind of like made to the top of like what I was doing, and then but then do I leave? I mean, who very relatable problems. I think
Mhm.
you know it's a pretty common like feeling that a lot of people get in their careers. But what's really interesting is like looking back. I'm like looking back on my like VOD of when I streamed it just to like remind myself of the details. One of the first things Swansea says, which is also classic like old head stuff to say, which is like, oh, the writing's been on the wall for a while. He's like, Pony Express is one of the last human man ships. So like, and I think that's also like speaks to his character archetype, which also makes me feel like this is why I'm a million years old, like because the anti-capitalism forms earlier as capitalism gets worse. But that feeling of like, yeah, like when bad things happen, you kind of do have this like, well, we all knew one day they'd screw us over, like that kind of vibe. And everyone doesn't start commiserating until Jimmy says, well, you got what you wanted. Meanwhile, Swansea, oh, he's really old. He's not going to be able to make it. Anya hasn't gotten to medical school. Daisuke's rich, but it doesn't even matter. And he kind of, Jimmy not only lashes out at Curly, but throws out everyone else's, like, what's the worst interpretation I can have for your situation? And to kind of stir the pot of, again, are these bad situations for everybody else? Yes. But Jimmy's the one that kind of not only brings up everyone else's kind of dirty laundry, but positions it almost as if, well, Jimmy, I guess you're happy now that everyone else is destitute. So it's an interesting, like, villainous kind of moment for Jimmy to have. And also a moment that really puts Curly in this awkward position. I think there's also something interesting about, like, it being his party. So it's like, look at the king who's here, like, kind of, he has his fancy cake and his savings account, and, like, it's just this really awkward situation to be in. And also he's still the boss too, which it's like, sure, it comes up, but, like, who at a certain point you have to have someone to beat up on, because you usually don't get to, like, fight Jeff Bezos or, like, Space Bezos or whatever. So it's like, okay, well, you're gonna want to lash out at somebody, and who's there? It's Curly.
Okay, I'm going to run through the next couple of events because a lot of the time swapping here is just kind of building up to things that pay off later. So we jump, and now we're back kind of in modern time, present day, and Jimmy is acting as captain. He begins to understand there's a lot of pressure at the top and starts to understand that Curly's position, instead of being just like, chip on my shoulder, I could do this so much better than you. And then when you're actually in the hot seat, it's not that easy. And we end with, for some reason, we have no idea why this is happening, Swansea is coming after us with an axe in the cockpit. Boom, we switch over to Anya has locked herself in the med bay. Daisuke confesses shares that there is a vent that goes from the utility room to the med bay, but Swansea, now drunk on mouthwash, super drunk, has not let anybody into the utility room, claiming that if they disturb the foam, that space will pour in and they'll all lose their oxygen and everyone will die. Cut to Daisuke is dying. He is lying on the ground. He is bloody, and we get the 8 hours until judgment. And this is the first time we see this treatment of time. So far, it's just been like days before the crash, months before the crash, months after the crash. Now we get this new until judgment, and we don't know what that means at all. So
and the weight gets heavier.
Yeah. Daisuke, we know, needs disinfectant for his wounds, but for a reason we don't know, the rubbing alcohol that we had found later in the game is no longer in our inventory. And we know from the comment that Anya made earlier when they first discovered the mouthwash, that the mouthwash won't work as disinfectant because there's so much sugar in it. But it's all they have. So Daisuke is not going to live. As a player, you can come to that conclusion. But as you are playing as Jimmy is still off to go get the mouthwash. And I don't know how to feel about that. I don't know if it's because it's the only thing we have, we might as well give it a shot, or was he just not paying attention when that was pointed out earlier, or I think here also we get the first monster chase, which I have thoughts about, and I know some of y'all have talked about as well. So let's go ahead and talk about all of that going on. How did y'all feel about the monster chase?
It's the one of two moments I did not like in this game. Gameplay wise. I think gameplay wise it's very annoying. Like you wrote here, I understand.
It's like the freaky thing that comes up from, like, the top,
from like the ceiling, you just have to
shadows.
freeze, and there's like invisible
kinda
walls
like-
you have to navigate.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Gameplay wise, not a fan. I understand what they were trying to go for.
100%.
Yeah.
I get the point of it, and I get what all the themes and connectings are. But yeah, it was so like,
It's annoying.
okay, I'm just dying over and over again. So if I freeze, I understand the riddle, but now I'm just standing here, and it's an invisible monster, so it's not that scary.
Invisible until it's not.
You can see it.
Yeah.
You can see it.
Yeah, you can choose to see it if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah, if
I
it gets
think
I mean, you
close
don't
enough,
like
it's
it.
so
when it
close
gets
to the
close
line.
enough,
Yeah.
then you have the
you can
the
kind of
correct
turn the
tool.
camera.
Yeah.
But yeah, I felt like at this I was like yeah, the freezing was a bit much where it was like as soon as I got it I was like okay, but now it's going to take me ages to get where I
Yeah.
need to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
like,
it
God
lost
forbid
the
you made a
momentum for
wrong
me.
turn and there's an invisible wall and you
Yes.
gotta, yeah. It's just, ugh.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But right after we get out of this monster chase, which took way longer than any other section of the game for me, we learn the reason they don't have the rubbing alcohol anymore is because they used it to spike Swansea so they could get into the utility room. So Daisuke is dying because they used it to trick Swansea. And Swansea, like they make like Daisuke says something about this, like making that cocktail, and then Swansea understands. Oh, the drink I consumed and that you made is the thing that's going to make sure that Daisuke is dead. And there's so much to that, like self-loathing in that moment for him of like me being a drunk has destroyed this person's chance of living, but also Jimmy has done this thing that causes it so that other people like this is what it's like to be the captain and you have made this decision that is ruined us all, that's destroyed a life. And you realize here this is where I really start to come around on Swansea
Mhm.
because he kind of drops the like hardened shell and talks about how Daisuke was the only one who deserved to make it. And you kind of get I came to the conclusion that he thought that Daisuke was the one who should have survived in the end.
Yeah, up until this point, we have seen Swansea really just go all in on drinking mouthwash and kind of and relapsing essentially as an alcoholic. And so he has given up. He has said, you know what, we're trapped, we're doomed. I'm just going to party here with my axe and my mouthwash, and we're just going to ride this out till the end. What we learn, he is obsessed with keeping folks out of the utility room, though. In that room there were 4 like cryogenic pods, and so what we learn in essentially drugging and making Swansea pass out with Jimmy and Daisuke is that there is 1 cryopod left. And so yeah, I'm with you, Jill, where I felt like there were 2 characters that I went back and forth a little bit on who I thought Swansea would want to have saved, because I don't think Swansea would have saved himself, which Jimmy accuses him a bit of when he
Yeah.
learns what's in the utility room. But I think Swansea does, like you said, realize specifically Daisuke represents this possibility that none of them have that he does. And he has been really brusque with the kid. He's like, the kid's in his 20s, but he's been really brusque with Daisuke for this whole time, kind of like just riding on him for the littlest things, saying like, well, I don't know why you're here, you're useless. You see in this moment he really has a soft spot for this kid. And so yeah, I think this was a very humanizing and redeeming moment, and I thought this was just really good character arc for Swansea. I will say throughout the entire game Jimmy was like for me, and at this point I'm just like, I detest Jimmy with like
Yeah,
every
this is when
fiber
it
of my
starts to
being.
really
When it starts
spiral.
to change. Yeah.
Jimmy is the worst. So yeah, just wanted to make that
Yeah.
character
I think this
moment
was
note as well.
this. I wish I could go back because I did stream it, so I have my reactions. I just don't fully remember what they are.
Yeah,
But I think this was the moment where I was like, "Am I the bad guy? Like, am I?" You know, you play as 2 people. You play as Jimmy and Curly, depending on what part of the timeline you're in. But I feel like you mainly play as Jimmy, so
Yeah.
like I kind of associated when I'm playing the game, I'm Jimmy. That was like my association, and I'm like, yeah, I think I might be the bad bad guy, like
Yeah.
around that time
Mhm.
where it's like kind of all going left. I'm sure it doesn't say anything good about me that like I always fucked with Swansea from the jump, because here's the thing, he was definitely toxic. He was like drinking. The axe thing was scary. I was like, why do you have an axe and you're drinking? Like that's very uncomfortable. But I think the thing that I always rocked with Swansea is he was, other than the fact that he was like a jerk to Daisuke, which I was not a fan of that. I think he was like too intense, but he was like such a straight shooter. Like when they crashed immediately, he's like, let's be real, we're not gonna live. And Jimmy's like, no, I'm gonna we're gonna figure this out. And he's like, huh, all right. And he kind of just he like just talks enough smack, where it's like he's not like getting in Jimmy's way or anything. He's just like, hey, like I came here, I'm doing my job. My job's to keep this area secure. I'm gonna keep doing my job and just play it out while I just drink and hang out. And then I think he only gets better in terms of like becoming more humanized and having more to him than just like kind of a selfish look, I think is what a lot of people might interpret his behavior as. But like, I'm like, this man knows it's going down. He has no like fake hope, and he's like just there. And is it healthy? No, but he also knows that it's not too, which I think doesn't give you a lot, so that I've known alcoholics before. It's like, it still doesn't, you're still not great, but hey, like he owns everything that he is. And I think that's also what makes him an interesting character, where like so much of the game is about like what makes a good person, what makes a bad person, who are, there's that line of, are you your worst moments, is kind of a question that is positioned to you. And I feel like Swansea like knows when he's in his worst moments. He like he doesn't hide about like who he is and what's wrong with him, where that can't be said of some of the rest of the crew. It's Jimmy. It's just
Jimmy. Yeah.
It's Jimmy. It's Jimmy. It's Jimmy.
Yeah, I think in Swansea, I think that's exactly it. As a character, what I appreciated about Swansea is I'm like, you know who you are. I've also seen, like, I've heard that you've grown because I know your history. I know where you are now. And like, I've seen you devolve, but I also understand why you're devolving. And you also understand why you're devolving, because like there is no hope right now, and you're just kind of like, I'm just going to do what I can with what I've got. Like what really just ticked me off about Jimmy is his like oscillation between like, I'm going to fix things and it's your fault. Like that's like what Jimmy's MO is the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, I want to take responsibility for this. But in taking responsibility, he like always makes it worse. And then he always sets to put out the blame on someone else. And so like for me, thinking about like the mouthwashing metaphor, because we're doing it, I'm just like, he is like the thing that thinks he's he's fixing, cleaning the mouth, but he's really just rotting everything from the inside. Oh, I just hate Jimmy.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
And while we look down at Daisuke's poor broken body, we cut. And if things looked bad before, after this particular cut, they're going to look a lot worse. And I want to again point out there's a content warning. Anyone who has experienced trauma, please think about it before you continue listening. So we get a cut to the objective: find the gun. And we have no idea what has happened and why this is happening, but we do get the one day before the crash. So this is before the crash, and for some reason there's a gun now that we didn't know about, and we're trying to find it. And as we are looking for the gun, if you enter the cockpit, you will see that Anya is on her knees in distress. And she reveals, like, for any woman who is watching this game, you immediately know, like, as soon as she says, she doesn't say exactly what has happened. It's never explicitly set out, and you don't see any visuals, and you don't see any like cutscenes or flashbacks to it or anything. But Anya is pregnant, and you can infer that she has been raped, and she has been raped by Jimmy. So she's tried to, I'm not exactly sure what the gun for her was. She can't open the case because only the captain has the code for the case. So she's stolen the case for the gun and hidden it. And part of it is it sounds like she didn't think the captain would keep her safe because the captain and Jimmy are friends. And so it seems like she was trying to get the gun to protect herself. But
I think it's more that
the thing she mentions is like that she wants to make sure that Jimmy can't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, she doesn't name Jimmy, but she's like, I want to make sure he can't have it.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's been illustrated multiple times. Like I think one of the first times you talk to Anya, she mentions like how the doors don't lock anywhere except for
the bedrooms.
And you're setting this up.
Yeah, the bedrooms don't lock, which is like really unsafe. Especially, I think one of the things I was like, she's the only woman on the ship. And
Yep.
so to be like the only woman on a ship of guys, you don't have a space like for any person, you know, regardless of whatever, to have a place to call your own that you can lock and be safe and secure. Like that would be horrible. But I think especially just the context of that, like having to live on a ship with your abuser, you cannot lock the doors. The ship's captain is his friend, and you really can't do anything about it. Also, if she reports this, going back to like the company structure, it's like if something is to go wrong on this, and this is a very wrong thing to happen, it's not that just Jimmy or just Curly will be punished, but like everyone's going to be punished. So for this is like I think where the true horror like really came through, because I was like, this is probably like I can't imagine much worse than this for her. And like
Mm-hmm.
it recontextualizes like why is she so jumpy with Jimmy? Why does she like weirdly kind of suck up sometimes where she's like, "Oh, great job, Jimmy, for finding like you find like a key or you find something early in the game and she told you where it was and she's like, "You did so good to find it. Wow." And I'm like, "Why is she acting like this towards me?" And it totally contextualizes all of that. And like I think for me this idea of if she has been physically assaulted, the pill specifically forcing someone to take a pill like that and hearing some of those sounds of like that
Yeah.
trauma, that really connecting those dots just like it gave me chills because I thought, yeah, it all made sense for me. And I
Yeah.
just felt so much for Anya in this moment.
I connected that in a different way as well with if she's far enough along to know that she is pregnant, she's probably experiencing morning sickness. She's
Yep.
probably
Yeah.
like
Mm.
Yep.
anything is going to set her to throw up and she's trying not to show any symptoms. Um so we have this discussion and then we cut immediately back to Daisuke in his dying state. So like this is such a fantastic narrative moment because just a few seconds before, a few minutes before, I was like, "No, don't cut away. What's happening to Daisuke?" And then you have this moment that's like, "Wow, I didn't expect anything more horrific to be happening, but now it is." And then you cut back to Daisuke, which is the thing you wanted just minutes ago, and now I'm like, "No, I want to see what happened with that situation." But no, we cut back to Daisuke. We have 6 hours before judgment, whatever that means. Swansea has his beautiful uh, revelation of what the kids' life could have, what their life could have been, and how they could have made each other better. Jimmy accuses Swansea of wanting a cryopad. Um, so before this, you were able to go into the med bay because the reason that Daisuke is so messed up is because he went into the vent and he was able to get into the med bay where Anya had locked herself in for whatever reason. So he was able to break open the door and we could go into the med bay. But again, the visuals being a great of a kind of foundational rock for the rest of the game, it looks like the game has sort of malfunctioned to not allow you to see one side of the med bay. So you have no idea what's happened on one side of it
Yeah.
until you get to this point in the game. Now you can see everything. You can very clearly see that Anya has taken her own life. She has overdosed. And in a game, this moment for me, this was so like striking because like in this game, which has a lot of what the hell just happened moments, a lot of like messed up stuff going on. I looked at Curly right after seeing Anya and I realized he was still breathing. And that's what made me go, "Oh no, he's still breathing. That's horrific." I was like, at least the mercy of death was brought to him as well, but it didn't. Like, that was my first reaction. And Curly is still there. He is still suffering and he's still in the midst of this horrific journey we are all going down. Uh, Anybody have any other big moments that they remember here? Anything they want to shout out?
I like that the danger of the ventilation is a key point throughout the game. It's not just like a random kind of just like MacGuffin that just randomly gets put in. It's appropriate. Again, going back to pacing and how well thought out the narrative structure is, even though there's a lot of jumping and whatnot. That was always a threat. So like in my mind, I was like, oh, is Swansea just like is Swansea like hiding something in there? Like, is there something like that they don't want to get discovered, whatever it may be? But like the realization of like, oh no, there's actually like there's danger in there, and because we didn't listen to him, it cost somebody, arguably the most innocent person on here, their lives. This gentle little boy.
Yeah, I think the only other thing that I want to point out now that I'm like re-looking at the game and its structure is I think the reveal with Anya being pregnant is an interesting one, because I do think a lot of people, depending on who you are, your background, whatever, like you might immediately clock that as like this was rape, this was a sexual assault, or you might not. It just kind of depends. But I think the game continuously gestures further towards that as the reveal or as like a piece of information. And I think they do that in a way that fits the vibe that they're trying to create, which is like the sort of secrecy of the whole thing for a number of reasons, besides the obvious reasons that people don't report sexual assaults. But there's also this layer of like the job, and like if anything ever goes wrong on the ship, they get like docked the points, and then also she has to be there for however longer, and then also the like who knows it, like the theoretically in that moment the only person she's talking to is Curly. So then there's also this like thing of, well, is this what I think? Like as a player, you might ask, is this what I think it is? And then you're kind of constantly hunting around. And it kind of also puts you in like, I think, a position of potential paranoia as well. And even if you did immediately clock it as like a rape, you might still be looking for like additional story confirmation. And I think looking back at it, it's really interesting how they set it up. They cut to that scene with Daisuke where like the first thing you see is he's there and he says, "I'm bleeding." And I think that also is kind of like reminiscent of like the physical traumas that can occur during like sexual assault, and kind of mirroring that like next to it is to like, it's like, how can we convey this scene or this like plot point without being, I don't know, gross about it, or what's the word? Like kind of voyeuristic. People talk about sometimes when stories take on traumatic events, there can be like the quote unquote like trauma porn of like and I think especially horror too, and a lot of genres there's a lot of like showing violence against women on screen, and like that being sometimes used for like gratuitous purposes, even though they are trying to like tell this story. So I felt like this was their way of how can we like gesture towards that violence without actually like being making it like fucked up, or making it what it doesn't need to be to convey it. So I thought that was an interesting narrative bit, and that builds as we go on with Swansea being like, oh yeah, like I've talked to her, and then that kind of fear of Jimmy being rattled of trying to throw accusations.
Recontextualizes the axe too, because now that it's like him carrying the axe, initially you're like, whoa, this drunk dude just carrying an axe, like what? That's weird. And then later you're like, actually, now I'm seeing Swansea, he is trying to be on the lookout and protect the rest of the crew from someone who he knows has the capacity to do harm and has already done it Yeah,
it's funny. As soon as I rolled credits, I was talking to Becca about this. She reviewed it for 6-1, and like my first message to her, my first DM was like, "Fucking Jimmy," and she's like, "Well, I don't know," because like I think she also like was in the same boat of like, was Anya assaulted? What because there wasn't like that additional piece of narrative line or whatever it may be. I think like when I first talked about it on here in a spoiler free capacity, I mentioned like the game doesn't explicitly tell you like beat for beat what is happening, and like it feels like there are times where there's no explicit through line, and I think that's what made me question it, was Becca's response to this entire scene versus mine, and how we had two totally different outcomes or interpretations of it. It's just like, I think again, to the credit of the writing and just how they decide to present the story and these characters, it's fascinating how different perspectives could be, especially towards like, clearly in my opinion, the villain of this story.
I went on Reddit after just to be like, this is what happened, right? And then Reddit's like, I think this is what happened. I was like, okay, yeah. But I think too, the power of it still, like, despite it being vague, is also you still do the game does make it easy to still position Jimmy as like a physically scary person, even if you don't necessarily interpret that scene as like confirmation that he assaulted her. Because like even if it was like some type of consensual relationship, it's like, well, why would she be afraid of him?
Yeah.
So that's the thing, and that's I think what is the evidence that supports that a rape took place. But even if you don't read it that way, it's like, well, maybe this guy is like scary though. Like maybe it's like, you know, another something is not right with their relationship.
And like
is also, I think, a good gesture that they indicate towards that.
with the conversation with Becca, I took it a step further of like going back to the beginning of the game. I was like, oh, did Anya never get a psyche eval?
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
And I started getting into that a little bit. It's just, game's like, it has so many layers and you could just like really peel back to in any different direction. But
yeah.
it's,
and the
it's
bedroom
wild.
thing that Jenny that you had mentioned earlier, that was something that my chat pointed out to me, where we were kind of like, as I was streaming it, you know, interpreting it, I'm like, oh, it's this, right? And then people are like, oh, I didn't realize that. And then someone pointed out and that's why she mentioned like, why don't they have locks? And they're like, why are there locks on this thing but not this? And they said for safety, and she kind of just doesn't say anything. And it's like looking back, it's like that's so eerie now with the context of knowing what we know now.
Yeah.
And it's like it points to the past but also to the future as to what she's planning on doing by locking the door so that people can't stop her from overdosing, essentially.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I will say I think this game really made me think about Curly a lot, because I think initially when I was playing, I was like, oh yeah, Curly, he's just trying to do his best. He's really nice. I think by the end of the game, I did feel less forgiving of Curly as well, simply because I think Anya came to him, or at least maybe she didn't directly come to him, I forget exactly, but she had talked to him about what was going on. And I think his inability to actually be a captain and like do something definitive about what happened, really, I was just like, man, this is like, it's not misguided kind, it's like the difference between being like a nice person who's like willing to let things slide versus like kind and intentionally kind in a way that you're like, no, I'm going to be kind to the people who deserve it, but then when something goes down, I'm going to do something about it. And I think Curly's major flaw, I'm like, I get it, you want to like think high level and protect the crew, but you are not protecting the crew and shoving this under the door or the rug. There's a scene. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I would say that also goes back to the whole topic of capitalism and how like, Anya, like maybe they cut corners of hiring somebody who doesn't have a medical degree. Clearly they didn't hire somebody who had actual leadership experience and had the capability of handling a situation like this.
Yeah.
But there's also no like space on the ship even for that.
Space.
Is the other issue. Space. Yeah. But it's like, what locks? Like there's not like a holding cell for like people either. So what do you really, and they're stuck there for like another 200 days, which is not to excuse Curly. I am not a Curly defender, you know. No. But
no,
I think there was
just,
like
Jimmy's a scumbag.
Yeah. No, I fuck with Swansea, and that's it. I mean, Anya, I guess as well, but you know, but like that's it. Those are the two homies.
Right.
Yeah, sure. You know, it's like
he just has money. He's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of Swansea,
whatever, right?
He has the last moment of mercy for Daisuke. In one of the most brutal things that we actually do see on camera and on screen in this game. Swansea takes his axe that he's been carrying around. It's been the Chekhov's gun? Is that it? Chekhov's gun? Y'all, people out there will know what I'm talking about. For the whole game, and look it up. For the whole game, he's had this, and suddenly he uses it as mercifully as possible to kill Daisuke instead of letting him slowly die of the infection of all of his wounds. Cut from that to 0 days before the crash, we are Anya tells us that she's told Jimmy. So that's pretty much all the context we get for that. But we know, obviously, Jimmy now knows that he is going down for a lot of problems once he gets back to Earth or wherever they're going. Curly goes to confront Jimmy, and this scene really cements for me how much I don't like Curly, because the confrontation is, Jimmy, we could figure this out. Like, why didn't you come talk to me? Well, I'm sorry? This man attacked another person on your crew and you're talking to him like, we can figure this out. We can get you out of trouble. Like, excuse me? Okay. But then
To be fair,
we
Curly got his punishment, I think.
yeah, Curly, yes.
This man has
Curly
no
quickly
lips.
begins to break down as Jimmy points very accurately out that Curly has failed absolutely in his responsibility to keep the crew safe. He is now in a position where they're going to lose all their livelihoods, whereas he's going to live happy and free and get everything that he wants. So, and I really want to discuss this moment because in a moment of it seemingly mental breakdown, Curly allows Jimmy to go into the cockpit to take care of things. And I just want to point out this part of the game is the only point in the game where we are in a third person view. We are not inhabiting first person of anybody. So we're watching this scene from the outside. What did y'all think Curly thought Jimmy was going to do?
I think Curly was just checked out at this point and just didn't know what to do. This is gonna be a weird kind of equivalent that I'm comparing it. This is Stu and Billy at the end of Scream, just like doing their thing, just trying to get out of it and be like the quote unquote saviors in Jimmy's terms, taking care of things. Like they think they are being saviors, they think they are being leaders, they think they're they got this whatever, like trying to salvage whatever sort of leadership god complex that they're trying to achieve here, which is kind of like shown throughout the narrative as well, of like Jimmy trying to be the fixer and the good guy, the savior, like I'm gonna get us out of this situation, but it's all delusion. And I think it's just all unhinged, checked out, like don't know what the hell you're actually doing, like it's all rationality is out the window.
Yeah, I feel a little bit. I don't think that's necessarily a forgiving take. I think I'm a little bit less forgiving than even that. I think Curly just
To be clear,
does
again,
not.
I'm
Yeah,
not a
I know, and
Curly
I know you're
Jimmy
not a Curly.
defender.
Yeah, I know you're not defending. I think
Scumbags.
for me, this was me like shaking my Steam Deck because it's like Jimmy has shown time and time again who he truly is.
Mhm.
Yet Curly, time and time again, refuses to actually acknowledge and stop Jimmy when he is continuously doing this stuff. We know they have history with one another. And so, like, I'm assuming like Curly knows this history and he has just been confronted with another proof. It's like now at this moment, when you see Jimmy saying he wants to take care of things, like you're in my head, you're thinking, nah, it's just Jimmy. What's the worst that Jimmy would really do? He's my guy. He's a little off, but he's my guy. He's fine. We can take care of it. And I'm like,
ignorant as fuck.
yeah, I think his inability to actually like check his friends when they need to be checked is what wrecks the crew. In some ways, it's like I think they're all at fault. But I'm like, man, if Curly could have just stood up to Jimmy and just like done something, who knows what would have happened, comparatively. I don't know.
Yeah. It's really interesting narratively that this is the moment that circles back to the opening scene because now you realize, oh, when I was playing the opening scene, I was not Curly. I was not the captain. I was Jimmy. And I was knowingly as Jimmy causing us to get into a crash because I thought my life was going to be over because I'm going down for sexual assault. I'm going down for
a classic man like shit man narrative, right? Of like, this is gonna end my life. Like, anyway, sorry.
So I'm gonna end it with everyone I'm helping. He thinks like it's so delusional. You can kind of start to see his delusions. Like he thinks that he's taking care of the situation and helping Curly by causing like he has this whole monologue about how Curly's gonna come out and be the hero of this tragic accident and still the big great captain that he's been, and he's going to die with that legacy, and that's how he's helping, is to let his friend die with a legacy intact. I don't even like, it's wild. And then you have that quick scene where you're back as Curly, and then Curly's like, Jimmy, what did you do? And I'm sitting here like, what do you think this man was gonna do when he said he was gonna take care of things and there's an asteroid coming at us? Like, I don't know if I believe 100% that Curly didn't know. I think he just got like his conscience back very quickly and was like, I don't want this to happen. But
Yeah, it's
like a little too late.
tough. I think when I first saw it, I didn't read it as like, oh, he definitely knew. Now looking back on it, I'm like, yeah, maybe he did know, because he was kind of like, okay. But then also maybe Jimmy's just the kind of guy who just be like saying wild stuff. You know what I mean? Where like Curly's just like, all right, Jimmy, sure thing, and then kind of never took him seriously, even though he is very like especially like looking at it with the hindsight of knowing what goes down and the order goes down in. But I guess that adds back to like, Mike, what you were saying with the sort of vagueness. Like, I think a lot of players would be like, yeah, he definitely knew. Like, he was like, hey, you're going to be staying at the top. And Curly was like, okay. And he's like, oh my God, what happened? And clutched his pearls at the end. Or he might have thought it was just like Jimmy's kind of crashing out, like metaphorically, and didn't think that Jimmy would crash out like literally. But also too, the security of this captain's area is not very secure. They're like Anya
Just
is
a
in there.
flashlight,
Like,
you know?
everybody's in
Just
there.
like-
Yeah,
Everyone's
people be
just
in
in there. Yeah, like everyone has that flashlight. Like literally everyone has walked through these corridors that are supposed to be like super secure, which is also kind of, I don't know, interesting. I think that also might, if I think about it more, speak towards Curly's leadership of wanting to be like that guy there for everyone. So maybe he had like this way too open door policy where like, hey, anyone can come in, and if you need to see me, you can just wander in, and not kind of following that protocol. Not to take Pony Express's side, because I would never, but you know, it's interesting.
Capitalist defender.
Yeah.
Cut
Like
to
they have it
1
there for
hour.
a reason. No, just
1 hour until judgment. Jimmy now has the gun. We solved the puzzle. We know how we have got the gun, and we go into the worst birthday party of all time. It is a rehash of the original surprise party, but everyone around the table is now a corpse. And you can see very clearly how everyone has died. And the birthday cake, instead of the birthday cake, we now have Curly, who is on the table. And after this is a series of puzzles, delusions, monster chases. One of the big things for me is that Swansea again gets a shining moment for the drunk realization that even in the in a capitalist world of this kind, where people are boiled down to what they can financially provide, Swansea has come to the realization that being drunk, so drunk that he doesn't understand the world and can't like physically understand anything, were the best moments of his life, were the most free moments of his life. And that's the most, it's scary how relatable that sentiment is.
Again,
I've never had a drinking problem, and
yeah.
I've never like felt exactly like this, but like that one hit really, really hard.
Similar to earlier, this is another moment that reminded me of my dad quite a bit, because he had quite the drinking problem. I was like,
I also have an alcoholic dad. Yeah, Mike, we're the same
Oh,
way.
yeah,
Like,
me too.
Oh my gosh.
My dad
Dark
was
pedestal,
another-
baby.
Okay. Hell yeah, let's
Wow.
go. I will say one thing it is good for though is like when they depict alcoholism well in media, because you're like,
yeah, yup. Dad,
It's like, oh,
Robert?
yeah. It's like, yeah. Anyway, but yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
just to because it's in here somewhere, because we shouted out the one gameplay thing we didn't like. I really hated the graveyard gunplay
Yes,
thing
me
here.
too.
It was so frustrating.
Like, I didn't even get the first time around. I got the MacGuffin, the like, okay, I have to be quiet and slow and stop. I didn't even get this one. I was just
They're
like, okay,
be
I'll just
fast.
run.
Like,
I'll just
you just
fucking
have to
run because I can't figure it out.
See, you have to, the hack of
true
two
gamer
hacks
moment.
I haven't. Yeah.
Okay.
The horror game hack for Scaredy Cats is to always have the wall at your back. So I did the same thing.
I
I'm
tried.
I'm just gonna wait. And then I just center myself where I can see the
two
left and the right.
corners,
I'm
yep.
like, yep. And then you just wait for him to show up. It's still a little hard, low key, because he does move really fast, but it's like this was like lo-fi Alan Wake, but without the flashlight to stun anybody. It was just like someone moving incredibly fast. But
They also knew because I popped the achievement for die 10 times in the goddamn graveyard.
Oh,
Oh my God.
dang. Wow.
yeah, I do think this game definitely like falls victim of we need to make sure we make it a game enough. And I'm like, no, like, the thing you do is good story. Don't worry about how much I'm doing. I want to just experience the story, and like the interactivity is just a way to immerse.
Just to like also clarify, like when I say like I hated it, quote unquote, it's just like compared to the rest of the game, these were like the lowest ones. It's not like the worst like comp I think I ever played in my life or anything like that. It's just compared to the rest of the game and how high of highs the rest of the game is. It just sucks that like they had a kind of sour with like kind of what felt like canned gameplay moments for the sake of making a video game.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, like just before we move on from it, I do want to like double shout out that line you pointed out, Jill, with Swansea and being like the best moments of my life was when I was like a piece of shit, like drunk off my ass. It's like, oh, that was so good because I've never really seen anyone like take that approach to like alcoholism meets clarity. Like I thought it was a really unique perspective, and I thought it was like really like wonderfully dark because it's like yeah, like how fucked up is that? And it's like, yeah, that's real fucked up. It's like, damn, and like that's scary. Like that thought is scary, and I think that's what's cool about. Again, this is not unique to Mouthwashing. There's other horror that like has this angle, but it plays with like what is scary in like different layers that you might not like think about. And like, what if what's scarier than being an alcoholic is actually like loving being an alcoholic and that being like the best thing that you had? Like, what if your worst days were the best days still? And that's like how messed up you are. Like that's better than like your kid being born and stuff. It's like, damn, that's messed up. And I like thought that was so like good. And that was one of my favorite parts of the game as like a Swansea stan and fellow child of an alcoholic. It's like, oh yeah, this hits. Yeah, I thought that was very cool.
I think too, talking about some of the gameplay that fell a bit short, I think that the puzzle aspect of this game, while visually wild and fraught with all manner of feelings involved, the puzzle itself was sort of not necessary. So like maybe they could have just had me push a button and all of the
which one
valves,
are you referring to?
the valvey ones.
Okay, so there I think there's that and I think it's right before it, the whole like ultrasound trying to find the little horse baby.
Yeah.
That was for me personally very hard to find the horse baby at times. Like I was just like kind of scanning
exactly
around.
what you were trying to do. I'm like, I found the horse baby.
Well,
I still don't know what I was trying to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say I like had the ultrasound on the heartbeat for the longest time, and like I felt like I was on it, and then I turned away and I went back and it was there. So I was just like, all right, okay. But
oh wait, sorry. That part I did know what to do when the tunnel part where it's like there's a bunch of them. I'm like, am I avoiding? Am I finding? It's like you had to.
No idea.
You had to kind of do both, and that was kind of funky. I think this game also falls victim to another thing that horror is notorious for that I don't like. Sometimes the dark's just too dark, and I think Mouthwashing holistically does a good job utilizing darkness because they have just enough light fixtures to kind of guide you through. The foam blocks off a lot of the areas you can go to. So I think they get away with a lot of like ultra darkness. And I checked the settings. There is no, because I tend to turn up the brightness on horror games, not just because I'm afraid, but because I find that when they want it to be dark, they want it to be too dark. And I'm like, I can't move. And I think the part that I got stuck in, funnily enough, was you're just walking down the hallway when there's fans because I just couldn't see that final corridor. And it took me forever to find it. I was like, what's going on? So I think a lot of that, because the narrative is so compelling, I still wouldn't quite couch this as they fumbled it gameplay at the end, even though they kind of technically, like a lot of the bad gameplay stuff is towards the end while they're trying to like, and I think that's what makes it frustrating because you end up getting confused and that slows things down. And I think that stops the pacing and it makes it like, well, it's not really tense anymore because now I'm fighting the game instead of like, maybe fighting Swansea or fighting the whatever, it's kind of just like, well, I'm spending a lot of time doing this so I can see what the next thing is. But I also, I couldn't do the turning the puzzle.
Yeah. I think
valves.
I kind of forgive it to some extent just because of how visually striking everything
Yes.
is. Like,
Yeah.
I
it just
think
works so much.
the thing that really saves them in this section, so I don't think of this section as being like, oh, this is the worst section, is that it's one of the strongest sections, like, creatively.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Mhm.
You know, it is absolutely incredible. I actually really love the kind of riddle-esque idea of, like, you can't look back now and solving that as a puzzle. And I'm like, I kind of really
That
like
one was
that.
that one was
That was-
fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really good.
The horse thing, like, I kind of thought about that later. All of that situation, that's not, to my understanding, that's not a heart. Where you're holding an ultrasound machine. So I think that's a uterus.
Yeah, I think it's a uterus.
So like he's literally visually dealing with what he has done with Anya. And I'm like, okay, so this, I'm not loving the fact that I don't know what to do with this ultrasound machine, but like all of and the fact that it's like a horse baby, like Polly,
Yeah.
and like, I'm like, I love all of that. So I'm willing to overlook that. Janet.
Which also fits into the thing that we didn't talk about because it's kind of not a throwaway because everything's pretty intentional in the game. But one thing, it's Jimmy that doesn't want to do a psychoval, right? Where he says he makes this like joke to Anya
Yeah.
that he's like turned on by cartoon horses. So, which I think it gets darker when you like kind of, because I think it gets darker in the context of the sexual assault because it adds this layer of additional ongoing sexual harassment that like ramped up to the eventual rape or presumed rape, because technically the game does never explicitly say that occurs. So it kind of adds to that. So it kind of, I think, besides being a reminder of the pregnancy, it's also like a twist on the like sexual perversion that he kind of introduced into their world, and turns that against him, which I think is also like kind of cool because a lot of, I think that's set up, it's like the ways that, you know, sexual jokes or whatever can be like weaponized against like women who aren't in like positions of powers to like say that they maybe aren't appreciative or they don't find it funny. So kind of turning that on him is cool. And I do think I kind of agree. Like I do ding the game for the gameplay flubs, but I do think they are throughout having visuals that have meaning. It's just that the implementation of how you interact with those visuals could have used a little bit of additional clarity.
Yeah. That moment with the valve puzzle and kind of realizing this is partly a delusion, but also partly what is reality, what is really happening, is that Jimmy is attempting in the most disturbing way possible to keep Curly alive by feeding himself. Is unbelievably like hard hitting and gut wrenching, and just I don't even have words for how grotesque that scene was. And it is sort of upsetting that I'm like, oh, I guess this one, no, I gotta move this one this way. Like, dimmed such a wild moment. But everything surrounding that is just so good. Also in the cemetery, like walking into one of the open structures and seeing Anya's picture there and like having that moment, it was a shining moment in like, oh no, okay, I got to figure out how to shoot Swansea. So yeah, I think they really saved themselves with just it being a brilliant game, versus at this moment flubbing the gameplay.
I think too, this has like one of my favorite visuals in the entire game, which is like on, I think it's after the graveyard before you feed Curly his own leg. If you know, you know.
Classic.
When you're walking up like it's like a grady kind of hallway, and it's like
Oh.
white underneath, but eventually you see like
yeah.
Curly's entire
So
face
good.
with like his teeth like showing and the eyeball. It's like, it is like one of the coolest things I've seen in a video game this year, I think. Like it's probably one of my favorite moments in a game in a while. Just like wonderfully done visual, and it's great how like the white, you don't realize it's the bandages until you get there, and it's just like it's like so cool. So I want to shout that out.
Yeah.
You also have this moment near the end where Jimmy is sort of making the attempt to come to some sort of accountability for himself and discussing the difference between like the things that have happened to him and the things he's done to people, and having some remorse but also being very delusional. And I was like, this is such a great portrayal of hurt people, and I've never seen it done as well in a video game before. And so like it is sympathetic in this moment, because in this moment I feel some spark of, yeah, I get it, Jimmy. Like life can hit you hard, but then you immediately remember like, oh, Jimmy hit people hard back because of this. So
Also, did life hit Jimmy hard, or did Jimmy just trip and fall? You know, and
Yeah,
like,
I was gonna say, because I feel like at this point that like when Jimmy is having this like, I don't know, sort of pseudo like come to Jesus moment, like, oh man, I think I'm reflecting on my life. I'm like, are you really, or are you still a little bit delusional and you just think you're the victim here again? Honestly, it was interesting because I was like, I wish I could have a bit more sympathy for you. And I can, like, there's some element where I'm like, I know that certain things for you are out of your control. Like, I know that you being put in a position where, like, because him and Swansea are really interesting parallels. Because Swansea does, in that conversation where he has that amazing line about, like these were the best days of my life. Swansea also mentions like, I really tried to have like the family, the job, the house with the picket fence. Like I wanted that because like as a man, that's like what you need to do. And obviously Jimmy has not achieved any of those, it seems. So he's like even further behind Swansea in that respect. And so it's like, I imagine that pressure, like that has to be just so exhausting and excruciating. But at the same time, there are plenty of people who feel that pressure who do not do the things you did.
Yeah.
And so for that, I was like, man, I will not feel
right.
Yeah. I think too,
Billions
that's kind of
do
where
from
you're
Scream.
you know what's funny too, Mike? I barely watched that like 2 weeks ago. So thank God that I already
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Did your research?
No, but yeah, like hopefully no one else has not seen
spoilers
Scream,
for a 25-year-old movie.
Well, what's funny about that too, very quick aside because I don't want to lose track of what we're here to talk about. I talked about that on like my podcast with Isaiah, and someone in the comments was like, I never saw it, but I was like, it's fine, I know the plot or whatever. And then I realized, no, I don't know the plot, and now I accidentally spoiled it. Where they thought like, I thought I knew what I needed to know about the movie, and I guess I didn't.
Dude, Scream rocks.
Yeah, but Scream was really good, and I didn't know anything about it going in. So I was, except for that one clip that I saw on TikTok of "Don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface, I want to be in the sequel." That's the only thing I knew. It's like that one tiny audio. Anyway, but yeah, I do think
Well, that's a scary
that
movie.
brings up, yeah.
Not Scream.
Well, no, it's not. That is also Scream.
Was it also Scream?
It's both. It was in Scream. Yeah. She says it when she's in the garage. She doesn't know that that's actually the killer. She just thinks it's someone messing around. And she's like, "Oh, do you want to play psycho killer?" And then she's like, "Oh my God, this is actually a murderer." And she starts throwing like beer bottles at him.
The sequel line,
I think I
don't know.
I think I know. No, I think I know. Mike, I just watched it.
Okay.
I just watched it. Like, it was literally like 1 second ago that I watched this. So, yeah, anyway, and for some reason that audio is on my For You page all the time because I don't know, people like showing off their costumes. But I think that goes back to what, to bring back to the topic, what you mentioned, Jenny, at the top of like your description of this game about being like an examination of masculinity. And I think they do a good job like positioning Swansea as kind of like that traditional, almost hyper masculine look, but like with a different angle to it, and like all of these different, minus Daisuke, who also I guess could be in there as well, but I don't think Daisuke's story is as much of like archetypal looks at masculinity in the same way, where it is the like the power and the wanting to like chase things. And I think also this game gestures a bit at the motif of a much darker version of, you know, the old like fable of the, you know, there was an old lady who swallowed a fly and then she swallowed a spider to catch a fly, like where it's the point of that little song is when you try to make something, when you do something bad or something bad happens and you try to make it better, sometimes you make it worse, and then you'll continue to go down that path until you have like complete destruction. And that like is this game, but much darker. Like I was looking at the Steam reviews because I love like seeing the little comments people put on like how they review these games, and someone said this game is the trolley problem, but there is no lever and there's no alternative track. You are just watching a group of people suffer, and that's literally like what this game is.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I wrote down one of the lines that impacted me the most was Anya's, where she talks about how our worst moments, she always wants to believe that the worst moments don't define people and doesn't make people beyond like fixing. And this idea of fixing is so compelling throughout the whole game because you have these different perspectives on like at what point are you maybe beyond this fixing? At what point do you change? Because we have Swansea who has seen, you know, the worst, who has tried changing his life, who has explored various ways of like his worst moments. I think Anya is interesting because we unfortunately don't know Anya beyond her worst moment, because her worst moment, I would assume, probably happened on that ship. And so it's like we only have defined Anya by her worst moment. Like Jimmy, it's just really this game is, honestly, the more we talk about it, the more I'm like, this game is really, really good. Like I thought it was a good game,
same.
but now I'm like, dang, God, there's so much to think about here. So yeah, I forget where I was going with that, but yep.
I was willing to listen no matter where you took us. But we cut from the scene to 0 hours before judgment, and we're at a cryopod. I think, like most games, the ending is the thing that's the most up for interpretation, and what's going on there. Jimmy, believing wholeheartedly that he is the hero of this story at this moment, takes Curly and puts him in the cryopod. Is Curly saved? Is this the nicest thing that Jimmy's ever done, or is this the most messed up thing that Jimmy has ever done?
I think it's pretty up there for like pretty messed up, but I think he thinks he's being nice, which is also like so classic. I think it's also classic for his crime, right? Of the if you look at the rape, because I think there is a lot of people that when you look at that societally, there will be like many like justifications or like, oops, like I didn't mean to, I got carried away, you know, and we don't know the setup of like what their dynamic like is or was, like, you know, assailant, I don't know what the noun version of the victim and like the assaulter or whatever, right? Like, but we like know that they're like still, I mean, they still obviously like talk and communicate, so there's that. And then also we know the other thing we know is about Anya is the optimism she tries to have for people. Now obviously it's like an assumption on our part to assume that it extends to Jimmy, but it also seems like there's maybe a part of her that has that feeling or that guilt of like not wanting to, you know, rock the boat or the ship or whatever. So I feel like this is that classic, this is like so like perfect for what he would do, where it's like, oh yeah, like this is gonna be my ultimate thing. And then also it's him, I think, carrying out his promise. And I think it's like, even if, when this also goes back to like another thing in the game, which like we didn't talk about this, but a visual motif of the game is like a black screen with white text that kind of says, I don't know if they're always like mouthwash specific stuff, but there's like at the beginning of the game too, it says this will hurt. And they bring up that like phrase a lot. And I feel like this was him being like, I am going to do what I came here to do, which is to have us all die, but have you be the hero on top that can like share the story. And even though the reality is he will probably just like, I don't know, black out from pain. And then also we don't know if this cryo things work. And we also don't know if Pony Express is even going to come for this freighter, for this company they don't care about. Like the answer is probably no to all those things. But it's this idea of he's like, I did it. And I feel like, oh yeah, like Jimmy's like, I ate with this. And like, no, you didn't, Jimmy. No, you did not. Anyway.
Yeah, last words of the game. I fixed it.
Yeah.
He wholeheartedly believes he's the hero of the story.
I ate with this. That's what he said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, arguably, like an interpretation throughout the entire game is that Curly just wants to end his misery, and now all of a sudden Curly is frozen and just
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
still there
Should
potentially.
should the impossible happen and he is saved 20 years from now, what does he have to look forward to? He is in life. He is the captain of a ship that exploded from a defunct company who has no limbs, has no ability to speak, can't communicate, like nothing but horror in his future. And I think it's one of the scariest possible endings for this game, in all honesty. Like, if everyone
Yeah.
had died, it would have been less scary. Also, by the way, that moment between him shooting himself, because you see a flash, so you know Jimmy has shot himself.
Yeah.
And then the cryopod turning on was
Mhm.
a moment where I didn't breathe. I was like, what
I know.
is
I was
he?
like, is this thing even like, is this not even going to work? Like,
Mhm.
because it the small consolation I had for Curly was I was like, at least if the cryopod works, if you know, assuming you are not going to get rescued, assuming you die in this cryopod, at least you probably will not feel it. You will have been
Right.
frozen if it
Like,
works.
all of the pain is gone.
Yeah, but I'm like, man, if this cryopod doesn't even work and now you're trapped in this thing, oh my god, like
Just
oof,
slowly
yeah.
dying.
And like, I love that this moment transitions directly and smoothly into the credits. Like, you don't get that cut. Like, the game is not over. You are still like, you're ruminating over everything that's just happened. Like, at the moment, like a lot of games do, the game at the very end of the credits says thank you to you for playing the game, and I literally cursed at the developer. I'm like, don't you say that to me. So that was my final reaction of the game. How about y'all? Final thoughts, wrap-ups?
Just a very disturbing smile at the end. This game rocks.
It's cool that you can look around
Yeah.
the pod when you. It's also cool they flip it's like the last switch of the game because you, as Jimmy, you carry Curly, and then it cuts to black, and then you suddenly are Curly, and Jimmy's like closing you in there,
Yeah.
and like that's also like kind of cool in the sense that like I think for what a game is, it's like, and then the developer puts you in your little hole and you just sit there. Like, I think it also kind of,
about what you've done.
yeah, it kind of gives you that like, I didn't have this because like, since the game was like a one-shot playthrough for me, like I don't really develop credit sadness for like a smaller game because there's not enough time with the game to like be sad that like what do I have to do next kind of vibe. But it kind of reminded me of that where it's like when you have like that game where you finish it and you just sit, it's like the game put you in there though, to sit, which is like kind of cool. I think there's like it's like a fun kind of meta commentary on what is the experience of playing a video game, and it is that you just then you sit there in your pod. Maybe your pod is the sofa, maybe your pod was your bed, but you're sitting in your own metaphorical pod while
Pod was
he's
the friends
there
you made
freezing.
along the way.
Yeah.
Anya looks like Shelley Duvall. Just want to point that out also. That was a
Yes,
Yeah, she's
I
so
thought that
Shelley
too.
Duvall.
Yep.
good game.
Well, yeah, good game. It is one
Mhm.
of those games, again, I said this at the top, I'll say it at the bottom. It's a game that I am very happy that I played, and I want people to go and play, but I don't think I'll ever play this game again.
Another gameplay thing. Did y'all find any of the ID cards?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I found a couple of them.
I think I found
Yep.
2 of them.
Maybe like
I
one.
found two.
What were
I
they?
think.
I think I found Anya and
I found
Daisuke.
Anya and Swansea.
I think I found Anya and
Anya
Daisuke.
Swansea. Where was
I don't remember how
Where's
many I found.
Dicey's?
I think it was next to his bed. I
Really?
think.
Oh, I must have missed it.
Oh yeah,
Maybe.
he also had a Game Boy.
He had a
there.
Game Boy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was cute.
He had the
little
chunky Game
weights.
Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was cute. Yeah.
Oh no, sorry, it was Swansea. It was in the like vending machine.
In the
I think,
vending
right?
machine.
Yeah, that's the one
Yeah.
I found.
Yep.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Really good game.
That was Mouthwashing. I hope everybody enjoyed. I hope if you haven't played, that we haven't spoiled everything for you to go back and check it out. Or Let us know if you have any thoughts, if we missed anything that you specifically wanted to say down in the comments below. Janet looks like she's ready to go.
Yeah, I have one. I'm trying to think of like last things to say. One thing I do want to point out, because I do think, rightfully so, like we were pretty critical of like some of those gameplay elements. One gameplay element I did really like, even though I did struggle to, like chat had to tell me how to do something, and then once I got that, I was fine. But I really liked making that whack ass cake. Like once I learned that I had
Yeah.
to use the other thing,
Yeah.
it's like
yeah.
it was very satisfying to like put one item. It's like one item on each side, and then you hit a button, and they kind of combine. Like it was very Jetsons-y, and it was an enjoyable experience making that shitty
Yo,
little cake on that
Janet,
ship.
if you enjoyed that mechanic, may I recommend Happy's Humble Burger Farm for you to play next?
That sounds
Don't do
scary.
it. Happy Humble's Burger Farm.
Oh, it's so good. It's another freak little game. Let's fucking go. It's so good.
I hope all of y'all are out there playing freak little games because it is Halloween when this is going out. So I hope you get to go have fun, enjoy your time, maybe get a little spooky, maybe go play mouthwashing. But if not, this session, this is the end of the council. Yeah. Thanks everyone to join us. Thanks for everyone who sat through the whole thing, or if you paused, went and played mouthwashing, came back. Thank you so much for coming back to hear the rest of it. You can check us out on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. The Indie Council has its own socials. Go check us out on Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram at the Indie Council. Mike has a quick announcement to make before the end of everything.
Yeah, because we're all involved with it. There will be news about the Indie Game Awards imminently. Just keep an eye on socials. That's it.
It's looming in the distance. But this session is closed. Go play some indies.